Yeah.
Okay, so we're being live streamed. So I would like to officially call this meeting to order. It's a special council meeting to receive public input on our 2022 draft operating and capital budget. I will note that Councillor Edwards has not joined us, though he did not send regrets, and Councillor Bridgeman did send regrets, so she will not be joining us. But all other members of council are here, as well as our senior staff. We also today want to acknowledge that we're on lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples, and it's been Indigenous peoples who have cared for this territory for the benefit of future generations. Their stewardship throughout the ages is certainly recognized. This meeting, as we know, is being live streamed. We have requested some public comment, and Madam Clerk, I haven't seen any official comment or broadcast to anyone of all of council at this particular time, but I do know we have a number of delegations. Is that correct?
A number of requests to delegate, but no other public comment to the TML address.
Okay, so that's great. Thank you. There was no supplementary agenda, but I'll turn to council at this particular time if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest. Thank you very much. I am not seeing any. So at this point, we do have a number of invited delegations, but I'm going to suggest that we hold them. They're here at 2 o'clock. They're in the waiting room. I see 5 people in the waiting room. 4 of them are delegations. I believe Kathy Duck is also just listening. She may be there to answer questions. But I'm going to turn over to Director Donaldson right now to give us a little bit of background as to where we've been, where we are, and hopefully where we're going to go for the 2022 budget. Director Donaldson, over to you.
Thank you, Worship.
It's not my speaker on, I can tell you that much.
Here we go.
I don't know why that's happening. Okay, I needed it.
Okay.
I think so.
Great. I think we're good. So thank you, Your Worship. So I'm pleased to speak to the 2022 draft operating and capital budget and forecast being presented for public comment today. Again, I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Township Strategic Leadership Team led by our CAO, Mr. Derek Hammond, in bringing this product together. A great deal of effort has gone into exploring ways to make this budget process for the public better, and we'll continue to make improvements to it in the future. Today, in this presentation, I'll just speak quickly to process, guidelines, and timelines that we follow, impact on tax rates. We'll talk about the operating and capital budgets themselves and the financials. There'll be a little discussion about new initiatives that are included in this budget, opportunities for public engagement, and the next steps in the approval process. So at the conclusion of the 2021 budget process, staff met with members of council and groups that submitted comments to the township to get feedback on the process and areas for improvement. From the comments that we received, areas of focus for this year's budget package included opportunities to enhance public engagement, to make better use of communications, improve the reporting, and requests to look more at historical actuals in establishing our 2022 budget requests. As a result, special efforts were taken this year, such as the use of our Engage Muskoka Lakes page on our website to receive comments in advance of presenting draft budget to General and Finance Committee, and providing enhanced public communication with respect to upcoming meetings. Capital and operating reports in this package have also been improved to make them easier to read and to find information. And in preparing this budget, staff also enhanced the use of historical and current year forecast information to help inform revenue and expense projections. Just some background. So the budget guidelines were presented by staff to the General Finance Committee at the August meeting. The guidelines called for a 5% increase in the net levy, which was 3.5% of that 5% was related to increases in contributions to reserves, which is about $440,000. In 2021, the net levy increase was 2.43%, and it was noted at that time last year that the 1.1% of that increase that was related to contributions to reserves was not sustainable and would need to increase in future years to be able to finance the 10-year capital budget and forecast for the rehabilitation and replacement of township infrastructure and fund the future cost of service plans. So this year's budget process is taking place earlier than last year. The draft budget was presented to General and Finance Committee on November 3rd and 4th, and the committee met again on November 23rd. After the public meeting being held today, a meeting of committee is scheduled for December 9th with final adoption of the 2022 budget currently scheduled for regular council meeting in January. In preparing this budget, staff continue to use the principles set out in our policies and to ensure that authorizations for spending are responsible, sustainable, strategic, and accountable. Staff have also used the best currently available information to arrive at future estimates and have adhered to all policies in the development of this budget document. Just with respect to the pandemic, the assumptions in this budget remain optimistic given the province's current pandemic exit plans, and assumes activities will recover to pre-pandemic levels in 2022. The township continues to hold unused funds provided by the federal and provincial governments to offset COVID cost pressures, such as for things such as enhanced cleaning or employing attendance monitors at facilities. These additional costs will be covered by those available funds provided. This chart is an illustration of the proportion of taxes paid by residents of Muskoka Lakes. The top section of the bar, the smallest section, represents the portion that is attributed to this township's budget. From this share, township pays for services such as the maintenance for roads, snow plowing and sanding, maintenance at parks, on trails, in facilities. It also pays for fire services and prevention, development services such as planning and bylaw, administration, economic development, and supports the Muskoka Lakes Public Library. This portion represents roughly 20% of the total tax bill received by residents. The middle portion of the bar reflects the education portion that is paid to the province, and the lower portion of the bar reflects the district's share. The net levy is influenced by two components, the rate and property assessment. The historical trend shown here are for tax rates based at a constant $500,000 property value over time. So no changes to assessment value. In recent years, the tax rate impacts have remained fairly level, but with the announcements from the province regarding the delays in the assessment growth phase-in, which normally occur every 4 years, a greater emphasis this year falls to the rate portion of the levy. This chart just shows the change in assessment values over time. As mentioned, you can see that growth in 2021 and 2022 flattened due to impacts of the pandemic. Modest growth in assessment has occurred this year based solely on modifications that were made to properties that MPAC has been able to assess through inspections. Properties that have not been modified and reassessed by MPAC are still at the assessment amounts they were at in 2020. So this is a summary, and looking at this table, the net required levy for 2022 will increase to $13,416,800, which is a 6.6% increase over the 2021 budget levy. The portion of the levy increase related to net operating costs, which includes transfers from reserves to support operations, will increase by $445,502 to $9,470,600 from $9,025,098 in 2021. Expenses are forecasted to increase by $574,132, plus an additional $209,000 due to a decrease in one-time COVID funding received in 2021 of $419,000, to be replaced by a one-time draw from reserves of $210,000 in 2022, which is to cover election costs and estimated 2022 COVID-related costs. Revenues from user fees and other revenues will increase by $337,630 to provide some offset against the 2022 tax levy. Contributions to reserves will increase by $387,210 to $3,946,200 from $3,558,990. That results in a breakdown of the 6.6% increase as a 3.5% related to the net operating expense and 3.1% related to contributions to reserves. Forecasted increases in the net levy for 2023 and 2024 shown here are estimates that will be revised during next year's budget deliberation. Contributions to reserves for 2023 are assumed to account for 4% of the 7.22% increase shown in this table. Just some key highlights. The operating budget presented includes all current service levels at 2022 prices. As well, new initiatives that were deliberated by the General Finance Committee are included in this presentation. These additions include 2 new full-time positions, 2 contract positions, and an increase in administrative hours in the building department, as well as the creation of 2 new reserves. I'll provide further details on these additions later in this presentation. The capital budget has been updated and some new projects added, but overall, the forecasted 10-year budget remains at the same level as last year at approximately $77 million. In 2021, the township began to develop master plans related to fire and to parks and recreation. Those plans have not yet been presented to council, and as such, no assumptions related to any outcomes from those master plans have been included in these assumptions. As mentioned earlier, an increase to the funding of reserves to finance major capital has been increased to nearly $4 million in 2022, and the plan does not contemplate any debt financing at this time. These 2 circle charts provide a breakdown of revenues, excluding the levy, and expenses for 2022. The largest source of revenue is license permits and rentals, of which the largest portion is related to the sale of building permits, followed by supplementary and omitted tax billings, which are 18% of revenues, which will arise from past year's property reassessments from MPAC. For expenses, the largest share is 63%, and that's related to salary and benefit costs for full-time and seasonal staff. A portion of this increase for 2022 also relates to positions that were added last year that were only for portion of the year last year that have now been annualized for the full year. Also included in this year's expenses are items for the upcoming 2022 election. And I would highlight that insurance costs have increased by 16% and make up 8% of our total expenses. Many municipalities in Ontario continue to face rising insurance premiums, and it continues to be a cause for concern. The increase this year relates to the hard market that is being experienced within the sector, with no indications from industry experts of when this may change. This chart just shows the level of capital investments over the next 10 years. The solid line noted at approximately $7.7 million per year is the average over the 10 years. Most of the costs, as you can see, are in the areas of public works, with half of all expenditures over the next 10 years relating to roads and bridges or core infrastructure in the township. This chart shows the estimated level of estimated year-end reserve balances. The average balance, noted by the solid line, takes into consideration both contributions and fund requirements and assumes an increasing level of contributions over the 10 years to maintain reserves at their current balances, current levels. With respect to the new initiatives I mentioned earlier, the communications officer, the planning position, and the GIS contract specialist are costs added to this year's budget that would be funded from the levy. There is an increase in admin support and the contract services for enhancement of the septic reinspection program that will be funded from the issue of building permits in the building department. The creation of the 2 new reserves are being funded from surpluses realized from past years and do not have any impact on the 2022 net levy. The General Finance Committee were provided with all input received from the township's budget engage page, which closed on October 8th. Based on comments heard last year, it was important to hear from the public before a draft was presented, and we look forward to making further enhancements to public engagements in the future. So the path forward to following receiving public comments at today's meeting, a final draft of the operating capital budget will be prepared for final deliberation, and currently a meeting is scheduled for December 9th. And as mentioned, we are scheduled for final adoption at council meeting, the regular council meeting of the budget on January 12th of the new year. And thank you, Your Worship. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Director Donaldson. We'll go to back to the Zoom screen, which we are. Thank you very much. And just for council, just to remind us, basically we're here today to take in public comment, and then we have some future deliberation meetings. Welcome, Councillor Edwards, for joining us. We do have a number of people in the waiting room, and maybe we can bring them in one by one. I think our first speaker is Liz Denyer from the Muskoka Ratepayers Association. So maybe we can get Liz to join the meeting. Excuse me. There we go. Liz is coming in. And we'll get you to turn on your camera, Liz, hopefully. And there's your microphone on. I appreciate it. But just remind everybody, we have 5 minutes for this. I know I'm not going to be too vigilant. We have got about 4 people who want to speak. But especially if you've heard it before, you can kind of say what they said, or I agree. So Liz, the floor is yours, but we would appreciate your camera on if that's okay. Just love to see the face. Thank you. Oh,
good afternoon.
Look like Liz Denyer. Hello, Don. Welcome. Former mayor.
I've had an operation, so I don't look the same anymore. There's 2 of us here, Mayor Harding, and we can do it either one person presenting in the interest of saving time, or we can divide it up for 2 people. It's your call.
Don, why don't you, if I may, start, and we'll see how we go with time at this particular point. And if for some reason we get bored of listening to your voice, I'm assuming you're going to start, we'll ask for Liz to chime in, but I'll let you go ahead.
Fair enough. My name and address is Don Furniss, 1208 Morris Road, Morris, Ontario, P1L0M8. And I'm speaking on behalf of the Muskoka Ratepayers Association. The MRA would like to thank Your Worship, councillors, and staff for the opportunity to provide our comment on next year's budget. The MRA, due to time constraints, will comment on only 4 major concerns: staffing creep, non-restricted financial reserves, liability insurance, and facilities infrastructure, plus a couple of general comments. In general, the MRA is pleased to see the multi-year forecasting for both operational capital expenditures. We assume there's going to be a high degree of efficacy in the numbers. The use of dedicated budget software should make the process more productive and less time-consuming for staff versus the former use of Excel spreadsheets. The objective of having the budget completed very early also has a downside, truncating the accumulation of actual 2021 data, and we believe negatively impacts the efficacy of prior year and actuals. The second point we would make is that all governments expand over time. Mission creep and bureaucratic inertia make it hard to contain or pare back. Voters, lobbyists, politicians, and employees have vested interest to perpetuate this increased spending. And this council needs to be fully aware that this cost disease runs rampant through almost all governments. Government inefficiency, along with captive sources of revenue, the taxpayer, amplifies this propensity to spend other people's money. 6 years ago, in 2016, wages and benefits were $6,857,000. In 2022, they're going to be $8,744,000, more than a 27% increase, or 4% per year compounded. Note, many of your employees were limited to 1 or 2% per year in salary adjustments under a 5-year union contract. Let's look at some of the reasons for this above inflationary creep. Communications. This was a FedNor intern position in 2016. In 2022, with the proposed additional hire at $100,000 per annum, it will be a two-person department costing over $200,000 per year. Human resources. This was a half-time contract position to deal with health and safety programs to ensure compliance with provincially mandated legislation. In 2022, it's a three-person department costing over almost $300,000 per year. Bylaw enforcement went from a part-time summer position, a couple of summer students and septic inspections in 2015. The estimated cost was about $50,000 per year. In 2022, there's going to be 2 full-time bylaw enforcement officers, septic inspectors, a couple of part-time bylaw officers, and we assume some septic inspectors, and the cost is over $300,000 per year. Well, staff increases in buildings so far have been self-funding from permit fees. These fees from taxpayers are not a limitless source of revenue. Increases in the number of inspectors, adding to full-time complement via replacement of seasonal or part-time staff, should be a concern to council, especially when it's unlikely the robust building activity of the past 15 years will continue to infinity or even under the new OP. Any added headcount must be considered in the same light as a multi-million-dollar capital expenditure, because that's literally what it is. It's a perpetual annual expenditure. Bylaw and planning are primarily individual property-specific services. Like building, it's the MRA's belief that the cost to run many of these activities and these departments should be recouped via fines, penalties, and fees based on budgets for bylaw of over 300,000, up from 90,000 in 16, 25,000 in 2015, and a cost recovery now of only 24,000 per year. The MRA questions the need for this level of enforcement expenditure. Certainly, the staffing levels cannot be justified based on penalties of only $12,000 per year. Revenues seem to indicate there's a high level of compliance with the TML bylaws. Is council using a sledgehammer to try and satisfy a few squeaky wheels? The MRA believes a professional evaluation of bylaw enforcement needs must be done versus knee-jerk solutions to perceived problems via the lens of squeaky wheels. The MRA has expressed our concerns to staff and council over many years about inadequate reserves and their continued depletion. This budget further reinforces those concerns. First, the 10-year forecast started in 2022. With the current year forecast and prior year actuals nowhere to be found. This lack of information obfuscates the public's ability to objectively compare prior history to future projections. The MRA finds this lack of transparency very concerning. During the 2021 budget process, the MRA expressed our concerns regarding declining reserves and the impending crunch date when depleted reserves will not fund capital needs and emergencies, let alone meet acceptable provincial guidelines. In the 2021 budget, the total closing balance of reserves was $17,655,000. In 2022, it opens with $15,474,000. The MRA would like an explanation of the $2.2 million deficit variance. Well, almost $3 million was budgeted for arena floor replacements in 21. It appears that none have been spent, and now they're in future year forecasts. Furthermore, closing reserve balances continue to decline by almost $2.5 million over the next 4 years. Council continues to undertax and finance capital expenditures from reserves that future taxpayers will have to pony up. Liability insurance premiums have increased from $619,000, which is 4% of your operating expenses in 2018, to $1,130,000, or 8% of operating expenses in 22, and are forecast to go to $1.617 million, or almost 11% of operating expenses in 24. The MRA continues to express grave concerns regarding the magnitude of the TML liability insurance premiums. Last year, we indicated TML is paying more than the district and 3 times more than paid by Lake of Bays or Georgian Bay Township. In addition, the Township of Muskoka Lakes has the highest deductible. These premiums are based on claims experience. The MRA has emphasized the need for risk mitigation actions to drive down claims and premiums. We were very disappointed in Council's Zoom call meeting with your insurance broker, BFL, in May of 2021, that not one of you raised even one question, let alone the simple question, what do we need to do differently to drive down our premium costs? The MRA sincerely hopes this is not an indication of lack of interest in this topic, because we believe getting these costs and claims under control needs to be job one for this council in 22. The MRA is pleased the new fire station for Minette is still in the long-term capital budget. It'll be 30 years after it was first slated for replacement.
So, and I'm going to suggest, Don, by the way, you're into Liz's time right now. So hopefully in the next few minutes you can wrap
Where
up.
are we, Phil?
You've got about a few minutes left between you and Liz.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up. No more than 2 minutes. We continue to be concerned with the number of fire halls, arenas, and community centers in the township. Many have seen better days long, long ago. There needs to be a thoughtful plan to rationalize and modernize these 26 facilities for long-term benefit of the community at large, and not just micro areas. 14 community centers generate $12,000 in revenue and cost $446,000 annually to operate, and are going to consume $2 million in capital over the next 10 years. The two arenas are going to bring in $67,000 in rental income and cost well over $650,000 to operate. And they're going to spend $5.6 million in capital over the next decade. It seems to the MRA that a good portion of this almost $20 million in taxpayer money for just arenas and community centers over 10 years would be better used to serve our aging community needs over the long term. The MRA thanks you for the opportunity to provide our suggestions and comments. Thank you.
Don, thank you for that. I'm assuming you have a written copy of that or electronic copy. If you could send that
yes,
in.
we tried to send it to you, Your Worship, but we're having difficulty with our website. But that will be sent to the either to all the councillors and to the clerk.
Not a problem.
We'll make sure that gets
the
done.
money into reserves to pay for your website. Anyway, we'll send that through. It would be great, and that'll be circulated, and we can discuss that at our next meeting. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next up, if I'm not mistaken, I have Dale Hogg. I think we can welcome into the meeting, and we will say goodbye to Don. We'll turn off your camera. Thank you again. Okay, there we go. Dale, welcome. We'll get you to turn on your camera.
Hi, can you see me now?
We can see you very well backlit through the, but
yeah, I apologize for that.
we can see you. I'll turn the floor over to yourself right now. On behalf, I think, of the Muskoka Lakes Association, I believe.
Yeah, so my name is Dale Hogg, and I'm at 1095 Rusty Rock Road in Gravenhurst, and I'm a director with Muskoka Lakes Association, or the MLA. And my focus with the MLA is to review all the budgets for all the municipalities under the MLA's coverage. So I've been following the TML's budgets now for 6 years. I just want to say that this is by far the best presentation I've seen. It's been significant improvements. So we're definitely grateful for that, as well as holding these meetings and discussions before the new year is greatly appreciated. This is how we think it should be done. So that's definitely a huge improvement. And just finally, I just want to say shout out to Mark Donaldson. I sent him my email comments and he's replied quickly to them. So I really do appreciate that. It helps us in moving forward. So there's two areas I want to address. The first one is relatively straightforward, is that we really appreciate the opportunity to provide public input. The problem is we don't get feedback on our comments. We could be making suggestions that, we clearly don't understand what's going on, and we will never know that if you don't give us, give the public feedback. And if there are issues we're bringing up that should be addressed, we think the township should, give us feedback to that point, and the reasons why it hasn't been addressed earlier. So we really value the opportunity to provide public input. We'd like to hear it come back as well. But my bigger issue I want to address, and there are two of my colleagues from the MLA will be addressing other issues when they speak. But the one issue I want to address is to do with the reserves. And if you look on page 115 of the budget, the reserve balance forecast, and Mark did a great job just a few minutes ago. I think it was page 13 and 14. He showed two charts. that just were pulled from this very page. So I thank him for showing that. And if you look at that, the reserve balance forecast, it's exactly what I would expect and would hope. And I think he's done a great job of presenting it out. And it clearly shows the capital requirements of around 8 million a year, and it varies as you would expect. And the fund contributions from yearly taxes to pay for that, and it's consistent, which is the whole purpose of this project. So I think he's done an excellent job of preparing this and presenting it. And it also tells me that if you look at the balance over the years, it's consistent. In fact, from 2023 to 2031, it's almost dead flat. And what that tells me is that the capital budget is being properly paid for by taxes collected in those years. And that's exactly what we would want to see. So this tells me a lot. It tells me that the future has been planned properly and that the capital budget's been fully funded, as I would hope. The problem is, and if you look at the 2020 December year-end numbers or audited financial statements, you show a cash balance of $19 million, and this is not including restricted cash. And if you look at the recent tax increases and the planned 18% over the next 3-year increases, that amount is going to grow significantly. But the net consequence of this is, in the past 5 years, the township has collected over $15 more than it needs to fund its capital, or roughly a full year's worth of taxes paid by individual taxpayers. And so what we're really driving to is that we think, and contrary to what we hear often, we think that the reserve budget is actually overfunded by a full year's worth of taxes, and that's going to go to 2 years worth of taxes in the next 5 years. So there's two conclusions from this. Either the township is truly over collecting taxes for the reserves, because based on page 115 in the chart shown, capital expenditures are fully funded going forward. So either we're completely misreading this, which totally admit maybe we are, and we'd like to find that out, why we're misreading these numbers, or in fact, the township's over collecting on taxes. And so what we're asking is the opportunity before council approves the budget is to sit down with some councillors and staff and review the presentation to understand why our reading of it, and it's just not myself, others with financial backgrounds have reviewed this as well, and try to help us understand why we see a fully funded capital budget going forward, yet we see almost $20 million in cash sitting there not being required, as evidenced by the capital budget. So if we could arrange a meeting, I would greatly appreciate it to review this issue. And that's the main point I wanted to bring out today.
Okay, thank you very much, Dale. Appreciate it. And just for council and for Dale and for Debbie and Frank who are also come, and for Don and Liz who've already commented. At the end of all of this, I'm going to have Director Donaldson sort of give us a summary of what we've heard today, that he'll be able to go back and be able to provide some answers to council and also to you guys individually. I do know that Director Donaldson is always available to answer questions. And again, if people are misunderstanding our reserves, certainly he's happy to discuss that. Appreciate it. And Dale, again, if your comments could be sent to the clerk, we would be certainly appreciated. Yeah, the MLA has prepared a letter, and you should have that shortly. Okay, thank you very much. Great. We're going to welcome in Debbie Korolnik, I'm going to guess. Names were not really good. I could screw up Smith if I tried. Is it Smith or Smythe? I guess one has a Y, one has an I. Debbie, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good guess on the pronunciation.
Thank you.
Ms. Korolnik. I'm at 1354 Innisfree Road in Bala, POC 1AO, and I am also a volunteer with Muskoka Lakes Association, sitting on the Government and Land Use Committee, and it's in that capacity that I'm speaking to you today. I wanted to focus on the service enhancements, what's been called the a la carte items in the 2022 budget. There are 8 in total, and these 8 represent a 3.5% increase to the tax levy, which is more than half of the proposed increase of 6.62% for 2022. Specifically, I wanted to mention the Community Improvement Reserve of $150,000 a year, or 1.2%. The Muskoka Lakes Association agrees with those councillors who've stated at the General Finance Committee meetings that it's premature to increase taxes by this amount in support of these initiatives, which have not yet even been completed. I understand that the community improvement plans are to be completed by the end of this calendar year. However, it will take time to implement those initiatives. If I'm not mistaken, planning staff can correct me. I do believe an official plan amendment may be required to establish the community improvement plan areas. Otherwise, you can get into troubles with bonusing, which is not allowed under the Municipal Act. And then there will have to be some kind of implementation plan, applications to be filled out, the bones, the meat and the bones of the program. So really to start building reserves in 2022 for a program that we really don't know what it looks like yet, I think is premature. No doubt it will cost some money, but perhaps it's premature at this point to start saving for that. Similarly, the climate change tax increase that's required of $25,000 a year, it's a small impact, 0.2%. However, the climate action plan is not even due for completion until the fourth quarter of 2022. And we don't know what that looks like. The community or the climate action plan will have some items in it. It mentions things like charging stations, and that kind of thing. But again, we just believe it's premature to start collecting money when you're looking at a 6.62% tax increase in this year. The treasurer did note that the COVID money hasn't even been spent yet, $394,000. So, you know, that's another item. And finally, we don't support the township hiring a GIS specialist. We don't believe that taxes should be increased to pay for this new position when the need and the benefit of mapping development approvals at the township level has not really been established. The District of Muskoka, as you well know, has a pretty robust GIS department, and I see that the position is planned to be housed at the district. But perhaps some further study could be done on the need and what this program might look like before the GIS specialist is hired. We do support the additional planner to reduce the backlog in development applications. That's an obvious need in the township. I don't know what you're going to do about your 12-hour planning committee meetings, but anyway, and those are my remarks. Your Worship, thank you very much for the opportunity to have MLA express their views.
Thank you very much for that, Debbie. Also, if we can get your views to us. Just a couple of notes. It's interesting. You've probably been speaking to our councillors in advance. Our last planning meeting, council actually decided not to tax the levy for the CIP reserve or the climate action. There was some unallocated marks in our reserves currently, which seems to be the topic of the MLA today, and that's reserves. And all we were doing was earmarking some of those monies, not to increase taxes, but to take existing money from reserves and just earmark it. So certainly heard in particular.
Thank you
So,
for that.
thank you.
I didn't realize that.
Not a problem at all. And last, but certainly not least, our favorite financial delegate, the numbers guru himself. We'll welcome him into the waiting room. Mr. Pato.
Your Worship, can you hear me or see me?
We can hear you, and now we can see you.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, the reserves is a point for the MLA. Hi, I'm Frank Pato, the Wistow Island, PO Box 37, Port Carling. First of all, let me say, I want to echo the comments of others. I think there's been some tremendous improvement done in the budgeting and the presentation at the township. And I think it shows a lot of work on behalf of staff and the council. And I'm very grateful for it. And I want to say thank you. Second of all, I also think you guys should be applauded for, up until this budget that's proposed right now, since 2019, I think you guys have done a terrific job of managing your expenses so that the mill rate is not significantly increased. And I compare that to, frankly, under the prior term of council from 2011 to 2019, the mill rate increased about a third. The mill rate's the taxes you charge per dollar of assessed value. So what that means is if you're fiscally responsible in managing your expenses so that they don't increase more than the assessed property values increase, your mill rate wouldn't be going up. And it concerns me that we are now proposing a pretty big increase, 5% this year. Now, I recognize that for the 5%, like 80% of the increase is to fund addition to the reserves. And my question is, and I ask this question as a guy who's spent 35 years on Wall Street and has overseen capital budgets that have spent billions of dollars, but as a guy who is not an expert in municipal finance. So I apologize up front if I've misunderstood your audited financial statements or I've misunderstood the presentation from your treasurer. But on page 115 of the very long package that was, I think, on the November 3rd meeting that had 250 pages in it. And I apologize. I sent an email with a screenshot of the page, so the clerk has it, maybe to share with you guys if you want to know what I'm talking about. It's a page that basically says your reserve balance forecast is going to start next year. In other words, a month from now is $15,474,000. And 10 years from now, you'll have spent $77 million on capital projects, but you also brought in $74 million in revenue in terms of funding from the tax levy and also from interest earned. So that the net that you have to draw down your reserves over 10 years is roughly $3.5 million. So you start at 15, you end up at 12. That means you used up $3 million, but it took you 10 years to use up $3 million. That's roughly $300,000 a year. You've already got $15 million in your reserves. So my question is, if you never touch 80% of your reserves for the next 10 years, why are you pushing through this big tax increase this year to add even further to your reserves? I just wonder if, and maybe I don't understand it, but I do have degrees in this stuff and I've studied it pretty carefully. I don't understand why you're building such large reserves if you're not going to use them. You've got a municipal credit. You can use debt financing if you need to. I'm not suggesting that you borrow recklessly, but I am suggesting that it seems like you're building some pretty big reserves that, at least according to your own forecasts, the vast majority of it you're not going to need. And in fact, if this forecast is right, you could probably reduce your reserves over time, take money out of your reserves, not continue to build them at the rate you're proposing to build them in the next few years. And that's really the essence of my question. So again, I'm not trying to criticize. I'm trying to say I really appreciate your stewardship and your fiscal responsibility. And I certainly don't want to advocate for being irresponsible in the use of reserves. But I as a member of the public and someone who does, have some expertise in finance, it's certainly not obvious to me why you have this pressing need to build the reserves when, according to your own forecast, you're not going to be using them, or at least you're not going to be using 80% of them. And so that's my respectful comment to make, and to ask you to continue to do all the good things you do. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Potto. And we did receive your speaking notes today. I noticed the clerk circulated that just moments ago. I don't believe, Madam Clerk, that we have anybody else in the waiting room to speak on this budget.
No.
But at this time, I think what I'd like to do is actually turn it back to Mr. Donaldson. Obviously been taking notes and listening diligently. Mark, maybe you can just quickly summarize what you've heard today. And then I think when this comes back to our committee, that you would be able to provide some answers to some of the questions of which we've heard as to yes, no, or why they are. Mark, I'll turn it over to you briefly.
Thank you, Your Worship. So thank you to everybody who, members of the public who provided comment today. Very much appreciate the feedback and the information. Again, I think what I heard from the first speakers, from Mr. Furniss and the MRA, just some comments with respect to staffing levels and trends in that respect over the last several years. There were also some comments with respect to the adequacy or thereof of the reserve levels, which seemed to be a common thread through most of the speakers today. Some comments around insurance and the escalating insurance costs, which, as I had mentioned in my presentation, are an issue that all municipalities, from what I'm understanding in my conversations with my peers across the province, everybody seems to be feeling these pressures, and as well some issues just around facilities and facility maintenance and facility rehabilitation. Had some comments then from Mr. Hogan representing the MLA again. I think just looking for a little bit more understanding and clarity on the reserve strategy and the reserve balances that we have, and happy to provide some additional information. Ms. Gorlink, with respect to just comments around the service enhancements that were being added to this year's budget, and with respect to the reserves, which your worship you addressed, that are not being funded from the tax levy this year, and the other positions that were being added, and we do have additional COVID money, still unused COVID money in our reserve balances with respect to funds that were provided in 2020 from the province and from the feds to help with offsetting pressures, and hopeful that the current trends do begin to reverse themselves shortly, and that the province is able to continue with its exit strategy from the current COVID plans as well. And Mr. Votto, again, comment on reserves. So I think reserves and capital are a theme that I'm hearing requires a little bit more transparency, and certainly happy to provide that to committee. And if there is a desire, Mr. Hogg mentioned with respect to having a meeting, I will certainly happy to have conversations and defer that to members of council if they wish to participate. I think that would be the essence of what I captured in this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Similar notes to mine. Councillor Jaglowitz, you have a question?
Actually, Mr. Chair, I had a comment. Is this the appropriate time, or?
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. I just
and
wanted
the one thing I will say, Councillor Jaglowitz, before you go, and again, we are receiving public comments today, so we will be debating their comments later on. So I'll just leave it at that. Comments.
Actually, I'm going to be addressing the public comments.
Okay.
I want to thank the members of the public for coming forward and expressing their views. What I heard from each of them was that they thought that some good things are happening at the township, improvements in presentation and so on, but that the tax increase is too high. That's what I heard. And I just like the members to know that I agree with you, and I did not vote for this budget. And I'm looking for ways. You've all made suggestions on how we can reduce that increase, and I would hope that our staff and council would take that into consideration to see if we can't reduce that. We had a target of 5% before assessment increase. We're not there. I'd like to see us get to that. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate it. Okay, council. So we have a couple of options here. We're going to confirm our proceedings today. Right now, we have a special meeting scheduled to debate budget on the 9th of December in our General and Finance Committee. One of the things I do know is that regularly, and I notice, Councillor Nishikawa is still with us, at least in listening. We don't see her camera on, but I see her, she's still connected, that we do regularly add meetings. So we have a special council meeting or General and Finance Committee meeting scheduled for the 9th. My question, and I'm not sure if anybody wants to comment, that do we want to have Director Donaldson? We don't have to approve this today, and we don't have to approve this at the next meeting necessarily, but do we want potentially this to come back to our regular General and Finance Committee meeting? Do we need a half a day? Do we need 3 hours to debate this budget going forward? Or could we insert this as a topic of conversation on our December 15th regular General and Finance Committee meeting, which could still, that committee could then recommend any potential changes going forward. So I'm just asking the question, do we see Councillor Jaglowitz has got a thumb up with that? He's happy to deal with it on the 15th. I see Councillor Zavitz is as chair, noting that he's happy to deal with that. Councillor Hayes has got a thumb up. Councillor Edwards a thumb up. Councillor Nishikawa. So I'm kind of getting a sense that we are okay to forego the special GNF meeting on the 9th. Madam Clerk, are you satisfied that we have more than 2/3 of council here to be able to cancel that meeting and move it
Can we just do the resolution on that?
Okay, that's fine. We would need 2/3, but I'm happy to advance that resolution if I may. So I have a resolution potentially moved by Councillor Zavitz based on the discussion I've heard today, seconded by Councillor Kelly. Be it resolved that special GNF finance meeting scheduled for December 9th, 2021 be canceled, and the 2022 draft township operating capital budget be further deliberated at the general and finance meeting scheduled for December 15th, 2021 at 9 a.m. Any comments on that? Councillor Zavitz.
Thank you, and through you, I guess my only comment is I wouldn't want the public to perceive that we didn't think their input was important enough today to have that special meeting. So I think that what we're saying here is we're comfortable tackling this thing on that GNF meeting in the middle of December on our regular cycle. I just want that point well taken. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. And I think that would be our first item of business at 9 a.m. on the 15th of December. So just it also, I think, gives staff an opportunity, council an opportunity to digest the public comments, to do a little bit more homework ourselves, and then to come back either making changes, answering questions and comments, but for greater dialogue over the next 2 weeks with that. Okay, so you've all heard that resolution. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Madam Clerk, we are carried unanimously.
2/3 and carried. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I have a resolution moved by Councillor Roberts, seconded by Councillor Zavitz. Be it resolved that bylaw 2021-193 to confirm the proceedings of council be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. As for today, all those in favor? That's carried. And as Councillor Jagowitz said, I do want to thank those people in attendance today and those members of the public, especially our two significant ratepayer groups, Muskoka Lakes Association, Muskoka Ratepayers Association. Your comments and guiding towards this council and towards the financial stewardship of the community is certainly appreciated. So thank you for that. I have a final resolution, and that is moved by Councillor Jagowitz, seconded by Councillor Mazan. Be it resolved that council adjourn at 2:53 p.m. and the next regular meeting of council will be held on Wednesday, December 15th, 2021 at 1 p.m. electronically from the council chambers, municipal offices in Port Carling, Ontario, or at the call of the chair. All those in favor?
Carried.
That is carried. Thank you all. And again, thank you all to the public very much. And we just got ourselves a day on the 9th, and I look forward to seeing people on the 11th of December at the Port Carling Santa Claus Parade in person, hopefully.